Okay, good afternoon or good morning, as the case may be. So, welcome to our session for today, and we would be tackling now the topic on the question of morality. Now, this topic has two parts. One will be about on the moral agent, and the other will be about the moral act. Now, we have now our learning outcomes. So, first one that by the end of this course or by the end of this lesson, students or learners should have been able to determine the role of culture in moral behavior, then the context whether culture determines morality, and also we're going to examine the plausibility of culture as a factor of our moral decision making or behavior. First, on the notions of culture. Now, there are so many definitions of culture or concepts of culture as there are many social scientists or many professors or whatever we're going to call them. And the one that I'm going to emphasize here of all these definitions that we have will be the Edward Taylor's definition, or we call this one as the Taylorian definition or the Taylorian tradition on the conception of culture. And that one, they will say that that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, etc., acquired by man as a member in society. So this is something now that the definition entails that these are something that we acquire from womb to tomb as a member of society. We have to note here that as a member of society, since we are a member of that society, it follows we imbibe in that particular culture. We are introduced into the culture. It is not the culture being introduced to us, but rather we were or we are brought into the culture and we are taught about the culture. So, therefore, we can say that culture or man rather is possessed by culture. And it is not the other way around as we come to know it. Now, in that context, then, there is a perception, therefore, that when it comes to our moral behavior, then culture determines, are the one that the determining factor why we are like this. That context, which makes us the right way, the thinking of the right way, is defined, is being determined. That's why it's called cultural determination, is determined by culture. Filipinos are such because our culture taught us to be so. More than this, two versions of cultural determination that we can have. One, we call this one as the optimistic version. What is this optimistic version? We can change, that we are malleable, that our learning, our acquisition of culture can be changed. So if I'll go to other places, I can change my behavior. I can change my perspective. Everything is changeable. That's why I say human nature being infinitely malleable. Human being can choose the ways of life. Human beings can choose the ways of life, and they can choose the life that they would prefer. So, in other words, we can choose what type of culture we would like to adopt. The pessimistic culture or version, on the other hand, says that people are what they are, conditioned by culture. So we are conditioned, we are formed, meaning we are doomed for this particular behavior because you are in that culture. If you happen to be in that situation, then it happens to be so because you are born, you acquired the cultural traits or the traits attributed to that particular culture. Thus, there is a belief related to that. Therefore, it follows that therefore, since we are in the first world, therefore we have the best culture. Since you are right there outside, far from civilization, then you are superior, culturally superior, and therefore maybe perhaps, or say we can say that you are not fit to live in this society. And that is what we call as cultural ethnocentrism, the belief that one's culture is superior to that of others. And for the rest, if you are not like me, therefore you are inferior, nothing else. So, opposing to that is what they call cultural relativism. Cultural relativism, or the relativists would say, no, it's another way. It supposedly should not be like that. But pasabot that your culture and my culture is as good. My culture is as good as your culture. Walay taas, walay ubos, pare-pareha tang tanan. Why? Because we are different from each other. We were taught, we were born, and each culture where we belong, where we try to imbibe, partly of it is not our own fault. So whether we like it or not, we are equal. No inferior, no superior. Okay? Now, there's one thing that I forgot. Okay, we have that. Okay, so we have now. So, what should be our position then? Our position is what we call as the ethical. We call this one as the ethical relativism. So, it follows because there is cultural relativism. So, ethical relativism says that morality is relative to the norms of one's culture. So the concept of good and bad is dependent on one's culture. The concept of good and bad is dependent on one's perception of what is good and what is bad. Note, one's perception of what is good and what is bad. Thus, if we're going to highlight this one, it represents that a position that there are no moral absolutes and no moral right or wrong. In its broadest application, ethical relativism proposes that moral values are personal, note, personal, time-bounded, and situation or specific location specific. For example, the idea that premarital sex is considered acceptable or not acceptable is dependent on how it is being practiced in every locality. Premarital sex is considered morally unacceptable in many cultures across South Asia. For example, India. Girls are expected to be virgins when they get married, whereas premarital sex in some Western world is the norm, and it is totally acceptable for women to date and have sex if they choose to before they ever think of getting married. So, with that, we are going to end on this uh, on this uh, on this note that culture has therefore an underpinning in our moral decision making. As we would say, what happens in Boracay remains in Boracay. If you are in Rome, be a Roman, they would say. If you are in the States, then be an American, as they would say. Now, the question is it something acceptable or is it tenable? So, if you want to know more about ethical relativism, then I want you to watch this video. We have here the link. So, in your spare time, you can go to this material and then click on the video. Thank you, and thank you for listening, and good day. Bye bye.